Hello, welcome back to the pod book. So far, I've been trying to articulate a new understanding of some old spiritual ideas in a post-scientific way. And in this chapter, I'd like to think about how that affects living a spiritual life from this new perspective. I've said, look, every system is reading and responding to the universe, including you and me. And I've suggested that, from my experience, how I read and respond is dependent on my state, where state means what aspect of myself as a complex psychobiological system is operating at any one time. So that I see that I move through different states all the time as different aspects of me operate. And at their extremes can be a very closed down state where life seems quite grey and a struggle, and spiritual realities seem fantasy. And the other extreme is I can come into the unividual perspective. I can go up and there's a huge appreciation of life. There is a universal benevolence. It's utterly sublime. And spiritual reality seems completely obvious. And I've said, look, when I find myself heading towards this, I say, hey, Tim, go up now. Where up means come into the unividual perspective or the unividual processing. And I've also said that when I go up, there's this unividual benevolence, but I have an individual responsibility to express that benevolence in my life where I can respond. My responsibility is for how I respond to the actual relationships I have with the whole universe, others in my life. And in this chapter, I want to extend the idea of go up now into go up and love wisely. And I'd like to gloss what I mean by love wisely. So the first thing is that going up from this perspective is different to maybe the idea of coming into the awakened state in older traditions, because this is not about a withdrawal. It's about coming into a state in which you can better participate. And it's not coming into some perfect arriving, some perfect you. It's about giving yourself the best opportunity to evolve further. That you're an evolving, constantly evolving, and never arriving process. But you're living from this perspective, in an evolutionary world. So when you come up, there is tough choices. The world is not just full of other people who are up. It's full of people who are in all sorts of different states. If I take an extreme example that I was reading about just recently, think about the gangs in the Boko Haram in Nigeria who are coming into schools and stealing girls. I mean, how would I respond if that was my daughter? How would I love wisely in that situation? Well, not naively, that's for sure. So sometimes coming up and feeling the universal benevolence can be a beautiful, inclusive, soft love. But other times it's not. It's a courage to confront, because we live in an evolutionary world in which different people are in different states. And also, I've said I'm responsible for where I can respond, but which area of my responsibility do I prioritize at any one time? Exactly. Not obvious. I feel this real desire to serve the becoming. That's why I'm doing this pod book. But I also feel a real responsibility to serve my family. So maybe giving this pod book away is great for the becoming, but maybe it's not so good for my family, because there's a lot of my time with no money coming back to support them. How do I make those sort of decisions? So this is where I've arrived at with this dilemma, which is that if I plug into God, as it were, it doesn't make me perfect, but it does make me function at my best, the best I can at this particular juncture in my evolutionary journey. And that when me as an intelligent system, evolving intelligent system, plugs into that greater intelligence, that from the vast complex of processing all of these things, the nature of this complex reality I'm in, an intuition arises. And I act from it, in the knowledge that that intuition is not infallible, that it is a product of where I'm at right now, but that if I'm up, if I'm in the unividual perspective, it will be the best intuition I can find right now. And I'll make mistakes. And I have to learn from those. The whole universe is learning. It's an AI, like an AI that's learning, and I'm doing it consciously. So I can learn to be wiser. It's an old spiritual idea. I have an intuition. I act from it. It works well. I learn that. It doesn't work. I try and learn why. I become wiser. That the journey is about coming up into the most emergent place I can and learning to be wiser, learning to be wiser, learning to be wiser. And by all those choices, I'm forming myself. And if I'm making the best choices I can, I'm forming myself to be wiser. I'm developing new passivity that makes me a more intelligent or more wise system. And of course, if I've got time, if it's like I don't need to respond immediately, then I can open up that gap between reading and responding, which is reflecting, so that I can set up a loop with myself. And again, the AI analogy seems good here, because when I use AI, I ask it a question, it comes back with an answer, and then I redefine the question, push harder until I can keep going until I get what I'm looking for. Well, if you have time, that's what reflection's like, isn't it? You have an intuition, I think I should do this, but this is the way to respond. And then you can go, is it? What about this? Or, is there a better way? Or can I find can I reflect so deeply that I see some assumptions that I'm making underneath there, which are unconscious ideation, and change them? Or try out a more creative a way of ideating and come up with something better? But either way, what I'm doing is giving myself the best chance to process in the most emergent way and learning to be wise in how I respond, how I express that benevolence or love. So it requires an open system to keep evolving. But here is the thing that I really want to emphasize. I have a unique relationship with the universe, and so do you. So it seems to me that each one of us needs to find that wisdom for ourselves. The old idea that you get from spirituality is often a prescribed set of rules, ethics, the 10 Commandments, and you have to work out how the hell you live from those. To me, as I've been saying often, the new spirituality is creative, not prescriptive. It's not saying this is what you've got to do. It's going, this is how you can creatively find the wiser thing to do. And you have to find it, because no one else is exactly in your situation. Now, that doesn't mean you can't learn from other people. Of course you can. You can learn from the ancient masters. You can learn from the best books you've read. You can learn from your friends. You can learn from your children. You can learn from anything. And I think that's a really good idea. But ultimately, you're the system that's responding. And you are, it is your state that changes, and it is you that finds the intuition of how to love wisely. So go up, love wisely. One more thing I want to share in this chapter. I think it can also be helpful in living a spiritual life to do something else, which is a very old spiritual idea, along with awaken and be wise, which is to look at what stops you coming into the more emergent states. What parts of your passivity system keep pulling you into them, and you find yourself like this, not like this. And that's a very old idea of self-mastery. It's often talked about in the traditions, or you're able to transform your lower self by coming into your higher self. You're able to examine your shadow, for instance. Carl Jung talks about it like this: those aspects of yourself you don't want to see that are in the shadows, and that you can bring the light of consciousness onto and transform your passivity. Your ego, in the sense of being egotistical, in that sense of thinking only about me, and rather than that beautiful universal benevolence which comes from the more emergent states. And the word I find quite helpful, is the word tamed. And the reason is because there's a passage in the Gospels in which the figure of Jesus announces that the meek will inherit the earth. And that's a pretty confusing term, because it sounds quite sheepish and weak. Well, the meek will inherit the earth. What does that mean? And as you may or may not know, I've done a lot of work with the Gospels, and what struck me about that passage was the Gospel's written in Greek. The first translation is into Latin, and the word in Latin that's used, the verb that's used, is mansueto, and it means tamed. And I think the meaning there is the self-tamed will inherit the earth. And I think that's because it's a universally found spiritual idea, along with the other ones I've mentioned. Awaken or come into God and be wise is tame yourself. And that's because an awful lot of early spirituality is about taming the animal self. And that really means your instinctual passivity. If you think of the amazing advice that the figure of Jesus gives in the Gospels, again, where it says, look, if someone hits you on one cheek, turn the other one. Now, that is a incredibly strong thing to do, because it means that you've tamed your animal instinct that is just to hit back. But you haven't hit back. You've shown restraint. So that an awful lot of the spiritual traditions are about mastering or taming the lower passivity. If you go right to the other side of the world, in the Zen tradition, there's the idea of there's the 10 bulls story, which takes you through this spiritual journey in which the initiate tames the bull, and the bull is the animal passivity. It's the lower self. It's the less emergent algorithms, until the initiate is riding the bull, is tamed it, and is able to experience these more awakened states. And that's right. That's right. If we get pulled into this reactivity, we can't go up so easily. And, my experience is the best time to work on all of that is when you go up. So you go up and you look down. You're able to witness yourself from that perspective and go, ooh, right, I see what I do. I see how I get pulled into these other states, and that I can transform it. And that's a big part of becoming wiser. And, I was saying in the Gospels, Jesus saying the meek will inherit the world. And I want to say they have. It's happened, and in no small part because of Christianity. We are the self-tamed in comparison with our ancestors. An example which captures it for me is that if you look back in history, you see this kind of honor ethic where you insult me and we will have to fight until one of us dies. And that's incredibly prevalent, still is in many areas of the world. And then just a few hundred years ago, you see that evolve into, no, I'm not just going to fight. We'll meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and we'll have a duel, and then one of us will die because we're gentlemen. You see that transition. It's a certain level of self-tamedness. I didn't just react. I'm going to approach it in a more civilized way. I mean, this is not very long ago. This is the founding fathers of America did this, which is astonishing to me, because now it's unthinkable that I would set out to kill you because you upset me in some way. That's where we've moved to. We need to keep going. There's much further to go. But we're mastering or taming our less emergent passivity, and we're building our more emergent passivity to come up and to be wise. And that's really what I wanted to share with you in this chapter, because it's a very complex world and our lives are full of everything. So that it's helpful, I think, to have a simple but not naive way of approaching that process of how do I respond? How do I respond? How do I respond? And the approach that I've been exploring here is, well, go up if you can. Find the wisest intuition that you can find. Reflect on that if there's time. And learn so you become wiser. And part of that learning is know yourself and tame yourself or master yourself so that that lower passivity becomes less and less operative until you don't even notice that it's there. It's so far in your past. It's still in you, but it's just so far in your past that you're living increasingly a more unividual life. Join me in the next chapter where I'm going to explore the possibility that the emergence of a new type of human being, the unividual, will lead to a new type of human society. And let me remind you that if you sign up to my newsletter on my website, timfreak.com, you can hear about all the other things that I'm up to, as well as doing this podbook.